Assalamu alaikum to all of our viewers today, and welcome to TV1's Community Outreach Program. Today we have got two very esteemed guests with us. On my right hand side we've got Brother Mohammed, who is from a community interest company called the Communicate Company, and we're going to learn a little bit more about what he does and the programs that he's going to be running. And on my left we have also have another esteemed guest, who is our brother Abdul Wahid, and he is a very active member of the Aspire Party in Tower Hamlets, and he's also had his own experiences with the Communicate program, and he will also be sharing some of his experiences with us today. So welcome to both of you today, brothers. It's a pleasure to have you both. And today we are going to be speaking about a very important topic within our community that we're going to learn a little bit more about, and understandably it's an area that needs a lot of work. And inshallah, by the end of the program today, we're hoping to shed some light on what kind of work is being done and how you can take part, and just to raise some awareness, because as we're all aware, awareness is key in these kind of issues. So the Communicate Company, if you can tell us a little bit more about what kind of work you do, Brother Mohammed.
Sure. Firstly, assalamu alaikum to all the viewers and to yourself. And I'd just like to thank TV1 for hosting us and having us on to discuss this really important issue, which unfortunately prevails in our community. So I'm part of a community interest company called Communicate, and the purpose of this company is to raise awareness of a really fundamental problem that we have in especially the Bangladeshi and the Somali communities in the East End of London, which is speech and language communication difficulties. So what we have, especially in the youth of those communities, is a prevalence of those issues, which unfortunately leads into teenage and young adulthood because it's not picked up early enough. So the aim of our organization is to pick up on those issues at the formative years of a child's development. And those formative years are the years between 0 and 5, which a lot of people unfortunately will neglect because they feel that, okay, between the years of 0 and 5, they just leave their child to be. But actually between those years, there's a lot of developmental milestones that the child needs to reach, and those are helped by the parent engaging with that child. So our organization, what it does is focuses in on those skills and advises and helps parents to better communicate with their children, because otherwise the consequences unfortunately are quite negative, which we will hopefully can go through some of those a bit later on. But the key focus of our organization is to raise awareness of that and offer training and support to parents.
That's I'm really glad that you've touched on those topics, because as we all know, these kind of matters to do with speech and communication issues, learning difficulties, these are unfortunately not very these are not topics that have enough awareness at the moment. And unfortunately, because of that, we know that there are a lot of people in the UK who are in dire need of help, but they don't really know that there is an issue to start with. And I guess, Brother Mohammed, you can tell us a little bit more about it. But from what I've heard about the work that you do, a lot of the issues seem to stem from parents not even knowing that there is a problem. And I guess if you don't know there's a problem, how do you find a solution?
Sure, no, absolutely. So, I mean, if I can just draw back in terms of the issue in itself, like for instance, one of the implications, what we are well aware of in the community is the unfortunate circumstances we have where a lot of young people who turn to crime, a lot of young people, especially from the Bangladeshi and Somali communities, who end up in the youth justice system. What that's reflective of is a failure not just on parents, but the failure of just the system in itself, failing to pick up on those speech and language difficulties. Because how that's all connected is if you look at recent stats, 70% of young offenders in the youth justice system have a form of speech and language difficulty. And what's happened there is those children haven't been picked up early enough. And with early enough intervention, we could actually make a profound impact and make sure that some of these young people who end up in the youth offending system actually don't get there. So rather than be reactive, what we're trying to do with our organisation is raise awareness at early enough stage so we can be more proactive in our approach rather than reactive, because there's a lot of organisations, very good organisations out there who work with young offenders, and they're doing a fantastic job. And their role and their purpose is to be reactionary because they're there to go and rehabilitate. But our focus is on the other side, which is to be proactive and make sure that we actually don't get to that stage.
Yeah, and I think that's another very key point that you've picked up on there. When you take a reactive approach, you are very likely to miss those formative years that you mentioned are so important, the 0 to 5. So a proactive approach we can see is absolutely critical in this way. Now, Brother Mohammed has spoken, as you've picked up, on the relationship between young offenders and not picking up on children's speech and communication language difficulties at a young age. Now, maybe the audience needs to have a bit of an introduction as to your background. Brother Mohammed was a criminal lawyer who's done a lot of work in the community, and he's got a wealth of experience in criminal law, including with the youth justice system. And I think that puts him in a really strong position to look at the differences and the relationships between youth offending and this issue of speech and communication issues that are not being picked up. So do you want to give us a bit more background on, from your criminal law days, what kind of relationships between the speech and language issues did you find, and what kind of statistics did you see?
Sure. Yeah. So my background is I trained as a criminal lawyer, and in that time, and I worked at various organisations, especially human rights organisations. And in that time, what we found was there was a kind of disproportionate element of those young people who we were interacting with.
Yes.
Had a form of speech and language difficulty.
Yes.
And it's actually quite important to point out what speech and language difficulties actually entails. So there's a very wide spectrum. So you can have like somebody who has a simple delay in their communication to something more profound as like somebody being not being able to communicate, not being socially reclusive, etc. So the spectrum is quite wide. And what we found was a lot of these young people had one or another or multiple kind of diagnosis of those. Not diagnosis, but more they were showing signs of those. However, those things weren't picked up. If and when these would have been picked up, then the necessary interventions could have taken place to help prevent them leading into a route which led into eventual offending. So we found that there wasn't enough understanding of the issues, firstly within the home environment.
Yes.
And if the home environment, if the parents aren't educated, they're not given the tools to be able to identify these, then they're not going to pick up on it. They're not going to push the institutions, such as schools, to actually intervene and help them to kind of tackle those problems. And this is precisely why there's a lot more investment needed to be able to pick up on those.
Yes.
And this is where organizations such as ourselves, who are funding ourselves, are trying to raise that awareness, especially amongst parents. Because if parents are given the tools and the information, then you'll find they're the biggest advocates for change.
That's very important and key topics that Brother Mohammed has mentioned there. Is a very strong relationship between youth offending and and picking up on speech and language difficulties at a very young age. Now, I want to go over to our other guest, Brother Abdul Wahid, who's with us here today. Also, just a reminder to our guests today, if you do have any questions that you would like to ask either of our guests today, or if you've got any comments that you wish to make, or if you want to even share some experience that you've got of this nature, then please feel free to give us a call on the studio line, and we'll be more than happy to take your call. But in the meantime, let's go over to Brother Abdul Wahid. So, Brother Abdul Wahid, you do a lot of community work as a member of the Aspire Party, and as we were speaking before, you also work with the youth. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Firstly, thank you very much for inviting me onto the show, and assalamu alaikum to all the audience. As you just alluded, basically, I'm a councillor for the Aspire Party in Tower Hamlets. So that entails a lot of, in terms of community work, etc. I am also, my main profession is I'm a PE teacher at a secondary school. And before that, I've done a lot of work, youth work is my background as well.
Yes.
So some of the things that Mohammed actually picked up on is that we've got a lot of young people, sometimes because of this lack of communication, because of these barriers which haven't been picked up either by parents or the system, then what happens is these problems which if they had they been picked up could have been dealt with, and going on from youngsters to teenagers, they wouldn't go into these kind of criminal activities. So having worked with and work with kids at school, even as a teacher or professionals, they're there to teach. But you know, sometimes it's difficult if you don't know what you're looking for. What to look out for is difficult to know. But it's actually, if you know what you're looking for, it's quite simple to pick out when a child is saying something and they're not pronouncing or they're not coming out of the word correctly. If you know what you're looking for, it's quite easy to actually pick up on. So I think it's very important. What Mohammed also picked up on is that early intervention is the key. With anything, if we go to the doctors, any kind of illness, doctors tell us early signs, early intervention. If you spot the issue early, there's a better chance of dealing with it. So in this case, with speech and language, is early intervention, and like I said, it's just knowing those simple things to look out for. You don't have to be a professional.
Yeah.
Parents bringing up kids, they've got so much experience in terms of, some people are bringing up 3-4 children.
Yes.
They have that expertise, but actually what to look out for if they know. That
could be all the difference.
That's something that they can pick up on and then go to the relevant organizations or institutions out there and say, okay, I need help. And if they do that, that could prevent them suffering in the long term.
I would totally agree with you, because like we always hear, prevention is better than cure, and it goes without saying that if you are aware of a problem at an earlier stage, you're in a better position to tackle that. So I have the privilege here of being with two people who have got a wealth of experience of working with children and young people. And it's really a pleasure to have you both on the show, because you've got a lot to share with us. I'm going to go back to Brother Mohammed. So your organisation, Communicate, I understand you launched, or you had your first major event in 2021, and it was a major success. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that program that you had?
Sure. So we had our inaugural event last year at the LMC. Excuse me. So we had at the LMC, and it was actually a surprising and overwhelming success, because we were factoring in about 30-40 people to attend, but on the day we had about over 200 people who attended, and we carried out screening assessments for 48 people. Now, to have speech and language screening assessments of that quantity in one day is, we're talking about Guinness Book of Records type of achievement, because these screening assessments are quite complex and it requires a lot of skill. So we did 48, which is a major, major achievement. So what we'll be doing, and the purpose why we're on here as well as to raise awareness of the issues, is to also tell your viewers about an event, about a series of events we're running next week, which are advice and drop-in sessions based in Canary Wharf, and also 2 additional screening days similar to the ones we had at the LMC last year. So last year's event was a very brilliant success. We have a lot of kind of happy parents who went away with a brief diagnosis and report of what their child's difficulties were. So if I could maybe tell the viewers about next week's.
Yes, please do. So Brother Mohammed is going to tell you now, there are a series of events that are going to be taking place next week. I understand between the 19th and the 21st, is it?
22nd.
And the 22nd.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit more about exactly where the event's being held? And maybe it might be quite helpful to talk about, go by step on
Sure.
each day. What are you looking to achieve?
Sure, absolutely. So we are running from the 19th next week, which is Monday, through to the 22nd, which I believe is a Thursday. So on those days, what we'll be doing is breaking the each day up into kind of segments. So on the first day, we're going to be focusing on how to talk to your baby. Now, that sounds like such a simple thing to do.
Yes.
But you'll be surprised at how many people don't know what to do with their babies.
Yeah, it's actually quite an interesting thing that you've mentioned there, Brother Mohammed, because I wouldn't have known that it's that important to speak to your baby. I mean, you see, it sounds quite funny. You can probably chip in as well, Brother Abdul. Is that a lot of people make funny noises at their babies, and they do all these cute things to their babies. But to know that you actually need to speak to your baby, that might be something that a lot of people are not aware about.
Yeah.
So what's the importance of speaking to your baby, and how much speaking to your baby do you think people need to do?
Sure, absolutely. So it's actually very, very important in the formative years, because the years of 0 to 5, and without actually taking too much away from the events. Obviously, if you come along to the events, you'll find out about precisely what to do. And also, because I'm not a clinician, I won't be able to go into complex details. But what I can tell you is the 0 to 5 years are very important years in terms of how a baby and a child responds and reacts to talking to them. So they may start mimicking certain things at certain ages, but also their responses, so their eye contact when you're talking to them, etc. All of those things form part of a developmental milestone, milestones that you can see, and these help clinicians, parents, people in educational establishments understand whether that child is progressing nicely along those developmental scales. And it also helps to flag any issues that may arise. So that's why it's profoundly important that we are talking to our children, so we can recognize those. Otherwise, if we leave them to it, and with the advent of screen time as well, there's the tendency to just leave the screen on, and in that there's no developmental kind of interaction there. So on that Monday, on the 19th, they'll be focused on talking to your baby.
Brother Mohammed, sorry to interrupt you there.
Sure.
We're going to be taking a break shortly.
Sure.
We're definitely going to be coming back to this topic. But before we go on the break, there's a short clip that we want to show the audience today to give them a bit more insight about the programme. And it should be coming on quite shortly now for the viewers to see.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Shamina Rabi and I am a speech and language therapist. On Saturday, the 6th of November 2021, we held a free speech and language therapy workshop for the Bangladeshi community in East London. The sessions were conducted in English, Bengali, Hindi, Urdu, and Arabic. We assessed children who presented with speech, language, and communication needs. Parents also attended, and we were able to give advice, provide resources, and go through therapy techniques. Speech and language therapists work with children and young people who may have difficulties to follow instructions, they may not be speaking yet, their speech may not be clear, or they may have difficulties to put sentences together. We hope to continue providing speech and language therapy support. If you are interested in finding out any more information, please get in touch with us.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back, audience. Thank you very much for tuning in again to our community outreach program. Just a reminder, today we've got two very esteemed guests with me today, and we've got Brother Mohammed from the Communicate Community Interest Company, who are doing crucial work in our community, helping children who are suffering from speech and communication difficulties. And we've also got our esteemed brother Abdul Wahid, who is an active member of our community who works for the Aspire political group in the Tower Hamlets area. And just before we went on the break, we were watching a clip about some of the work that the Communicate group have been doing at an event that they had back in 2021. And also we were just speaking about the upcoming events that are taking place next week from Monday to Thursday, where you can go along to these events and you can seek some education and you can seek some assistance and gain some enlightenment as to how what kind of work the Communicate group do and how you and others can benefit from that work. So I would like to go over to our brother Abdul Wahid. So for our guests, I hope you are comfortable with us speaking about this. But you, as well as being an avid supporter of Brother Mohammed's work and Communicate's work, I understand that you've had a personal experience as well of the services that Communicate provide. So if you'd like to tell us a little bit more about that.
Thank you very much. I think like we touched on basically in terms of early intervention, I think when it comes to my personal experience, I was quite lucky because I had my 5-year-old who I've had basically who've had speech and language issues because he had 3 older siblings. Both me and my wife noticed basically there's a certain difference within his communication, which the other 3 we didn't experience. So in that way we were lucky, and then basically what happened was that triggered us to actually look into basically why his communication. When he was speaking, he wasn't making eye contacts. And when he was saying words, it wasn't clear, which we thought, okay, my other 3 kids, when they were growing up at that age, they were talking, all sorts of, making sounds, communicating. So what happened was I found out about the company and I approached them and they actually were very supportive. And I think basically we did a 6 or 7 visits where the staff members knew exactly what they were doing. They were so accommodating, being a teacher as well as a counsellor. Also, it was making that time to go and take him to those surgeries.
Yes.
So they came out of a package for me where it was suitable for me, time and date where I can take my son and to their surgeries. And like I said, the service that I got was really good. They even taught us skills or techniques where we can use at home. So what it is once you go to the surgeries, it's not the job doesn't finish there. It's about trying to implement those at home as well. So if you do that, then basically you see the results. If you're just waiting on going to the surgery and thinking, oh, everything's going to be fine, that it doesn't stop there. So my experience with working with the organisation in terms of as a service user was very, very positive. And we were lucky enough and fortunate enough to, like I said, notice the issues that my son was going, in terms of his language, speech and language, and it was good that we noticed that early.
Yes.
And that early intervention had so much positive impact in terms of now.
Yes.
His communication has come leaps and bounds. through the techniques that they taught us, through the sessions that we've had, and we've benefited so much. And end of the day, the message that, you know, to the parents from me as a parent would be that this is the future. You're looking at your child's future. You know, if you identify those issues at an early stage, there's a better chance of getting results. You know, these events that the group are doing, I think I would encourage people to come and see and pick up techniques and learn and see how they do stuff. And you know, it may not be your child, it may be someone that you know, your relative. And just simple techniques that, you know, you can pick up and you can notice in terms of if there's an issue, and the service is out there, you know, and they're more than welcome to contact them, and they'll be very supportive, and which they've been with me. So I had a really good impact, you know, in terms of service from the organisation. So I would highly recommend and ask parents, as a parent who's used it, to please, you know, this is for your child.
That's a really refreshing story that we've heard from Brother Abdul, because it's, you know, with children are always, as we all know, a very sensitive topic for all of us, and they're at our hearts, and they're very important to us, and they are our future. So these kind of situations can be very emotional, and they can be very sensitive. And like Brother Abdul has mentioned, you know, Brother Abdul, I think the benefit that he's had is he is fortunate enough to have had a background in the work that he does with younger people, and unfortunately, you know, you've managed to pick up on these things, but unfortunately, everybody is not equipped with the knowledge that Brother Abdul has been equipped with, and that is where Communicate's work comes in, and it's very crucial to build that awareness, because as you hear from Brother Abdul, early intervention, education, awareness, these are really important in tackling these kind of situations. And you know, from what we're hearing, you know, speech and communication difficulties, they don't need to be a lifelong issue that can't be assisted with the right support and with the right guidance. It's shown from Brother Abdul's own experience that these kind of services can really assist. So I'm going to go back to Brother Mohammed now. So I understand that when we were speaking earlier, that your wife is actually a therapist in communication studies. And do you want to tell us a little bit more about why this work is so important to you, and how you came about to, how you got introduced to this work?
Sure. So my initial kind of, obviously through my personal life, I was introduced to the work a speech and language therapist does. Before that, because of my work in criminal law, I understood the factors around, you know, children who, you know, had like issues such as autism, etc., you know, social issues, etc., that could lead to those elements. But it's only when I met, you know, through my personal life, met a speech and language therapist, became aware of their work and the amazing work that they do, that it kind of clicked and it kind of fell into place that one of the reasons why we have such a high number of young people who turn to crime, who end up in the youth offending system, is because of these speech and language difficulties, of these issues that have profound impacts on their social communication skills, that they then manifest in a way which is negative. Because essentially what it is if we can, you know, if we can take an example of a young person, what will happen is they haven't been diagnosed with any speech and language difficulties in their primary education. What happens is they end up in secondary school. They now have anxieties in certain social class settings that they feel if it manifests itself in front of other children, they will get either bullied, you know, tormented, taunted, So what they do is, to disguise that, what they do is they start misbehaving. So then it gets categorized, or it used to get categorized as a child who's misbehaving. So then what happens is they get excluded to one side. Then they form relationships with other children, like-minded children, and then what happens is you're now, kind of excluding them from mainstream education, and then they go down the route of gangs and offending. So that's the kind of, the scenario that presents ourselves if we don't educate parents, don't educate educational staff in terms of recognizing these problems and issues. So we want to do that. We want to raise awareness of that, and as a result of that, that's why we're running some of these workshops next week. And I think it's really important that parents utilize these sessions, because the last time we had sessions was last year, and we will aim to do sessions for as long as we can sustain them, because in the current climate it's difficult to kind of finance these kind of workshops. So it's vitally important that the parents utilize these.
From what our audience may not know is that Brother Mohammed and his organization are actually self-funding these events that are going to be taking place next week from Monday to Thursday. So there won't be any cost for you or your family members or your friends to attend these events. And it is actually something that you can access free of charge this coming week in Canary Wharf. And we've touched on the first day, Brother Mohammed, so you're going to be focusing on speaking to 0 to 5-year-old children and what's so important about it. I mean, what I'm gauging from the conversation that we're having, Brother Mohammed, is it's not all about the child. There's a really key, important role that the parents need to play, and a lot of it is about educating the parents as well. So, do you want to tell us about the next days of your program and what you're planning to cover?
Sure. So it's obviously the first element we spoke about was talking to your child. So that's obviously educating the parent in terms of what to do, how to interact with their baby. And then the second and third days will focus on things like attention, listening, and early receptive skills. So how to identify that in a child of 0 to 5. So that gives a parent the skills, the knowledge to be able to, what is a good developmental milestone? What are the milestones? At what ages shall I be picking those things up? Mm-hmm. So that will give them information about that, and also about alternative communication. So there's talking, there's also playing. Playing between the years of 0 to 5 is also profoundly important because of gauging the developmental kind of receptive skills of a child of that age. And then the other day what we'll be focusing on is how to spot, which is crucially, how to spot, because anybody can do it given the knowledge, how to spot signs of speech difficulties and even early cases of autism. So we are clinicians, and it's important to point out that these sessions are run through our partner organization who provides all the speech and language therapists, experienced speech and language therapists who will be there on the day, who will be screening children with us. So they will educate and inform those who attend the key signs of how to notice, there seems to be signs of speech difficulties or early signs of autism in a specific child. So these are the red flags that they will equip parents with, so that they can then go and see their practitioners, health practitioners, GPs, etc. And then the most important of the days next week is what we call the screening days. Mm-hmm. So on that day, parents are welcome to bring their child along, and we will do a short screening and a very brief report of what the child is presenting with, based on the time the therapist has had to work with the child. So that's also very important if, for instance, we all know at the moment the waiting lists are unfortunately quite long, especially in to get seen for a speech and language therapist, and or anything related with community outpatient visits. It's just the nature of where we are at the moment. So this won't give them an alternative because we don't have the time in those sessions to do so, but it will give them an indicator of where their child might be, so that they're equipped and they're better informed for when they do go and see their NHS speech and language therapist for their assessments.
That's actually very valuable time that you're going to be getting, and I really urge all of the audience today, whoever are watching and anybody who's not watching, please tell your family and friends, anybody who's got any concerns about children who may or may not have speech and communication difficulties, because as Brother Mohammed has very helpfully mentioned there, we need to be equipped with the tools to actually figure out what the problem is and to actually know that there's a problem before we can go to any solution. And what people need to be aware of is in these events that are taking place from Monday to Thursday, you're going to be having trained clinicians who are giving their time to you free of charge to give you that awareness and to hopefully point you in the right direction, and hopefully lead to answering a lot of questions that you either didn't know you need to be asking, or questions that you didn't even know the answer to. So that's very important, that anybody who's watching this, who knows anybody who may have these type of issues, please go along to these events. We've heard from Brother Abdul that he's had a personal experience of his children actually benefiting from these services. Now, with these kind of issues, there are some other wider issues that unfortunately that we see in our communities. I was speaking to Brother Mohammed and Brother Abdul in the break just some time ago about the stigma in our communities around speech and language difficulties or any kind of learning difficulties. And Brother Abdul, do you want to share a bit on what was your experience of, what kind of stigmas are there in the community at the moment?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really important part of the whole process here, is that sometimes especially as parents, is that we don't really sometimes want to open a can of worms. Like, so if my child, for example, is not talking clearly, then we think, okay, all right, he's only young or she's only young. Once they get older, that will develop. But what happens is basically sometimes we think, okay, if I take them to a speech and language therapist or something, what if they discover something else? And then basically there's that's something to worry about. What I would say as a parent is that this is, again, I mentioned it before, you're looking at your child's life. If there is an issue with speech and language, and sometimes, again, I'm not a clinician, so I can't give an accurate answer. But the thing is, if there is an issue with your child's speech, sometimes it's just simple stuff that Mohammed mentioned already, that simple steps that you can follow to make, to overcome these issues. And I think what happens is basically another thing within the BME, Bengali and Somali community is that, we don't want to be labelled as, okay, my child is, maybe they will be labelled as having some kind of disability, etc. Again, this is your child's life you're looking at. If they have an issue, if it is diagnosed early, there are ways of dealing with it and to make them better. So what I would say is forget about these stigmas, these issues that you feel. It's your child. If you love your child, if you want the best for your child, you need to find the solution for it. So as a parent, what I would say is that forget about all this stuff. Come and utilize the services. Like Mohammed said, these are professionals who are giving up their professional time to come and help and support you. So come and utilize the service. And like I said, I had a very positive experience, and I'm sure you will have the same. So I would highly encourage the parents. And just quickly, just to touch up on what Mohammed said before, is sometimes what happens is we tend to just basically say, for example, if a teenager, say 13, 14-year-old, if he or she has that issue, what we tend to say is that, okay, it's just a behavioral issue, you know, and just wave it away. Sometimes it's not, the behavior issue is coming because of the lack of that, you know, them unable to communicate or articulate what issues or what they want to communicate with you, and this is why they're having that issue. So basically, just putting it to a side by just saying, oh, it's a behavioral issue, you know, long term, it's going to have a really bad impact on that child growing up from teenage to adulthood. If it can be dealt with at an early age, we should take these opportunities that's available for us.
That's a very key point that you've mentioned there, Brother Abdul, that these are, again, the education seems to be the main, the main tool to deal with these types of, the best way to assist children is to educate ourselves first and foremost, so that we can spot these issues. And unfortunately, like we said, it's easy to brush these things to the side and say it's just a behavioural issue and it's just a naughty kid. From my experience of going to school as well, you know, the naughty kids always sit in the back and they're very disengaged. And it's very easy to say, oh, the ones in the back, they're the naughty kids, or they're the bad boys, or they're the, you know, ones we don't want to deal with. But actually, you know, there's a number of factors that that prevent us from dealing with children, giving them the support that they need. And it takes us back to the work that Communicate are doing, in that it's really about empowering parents to know how to spot that there are problems and to know how to deal with them. That's very important. Now, this topic of the stigma, for our audience out there, as we know, and Brother Abdul mentioned there, the stigma, unfortunately, it really saddens me to ever see it, is that whenever there's any issues to do with learning difficulties or language difficulties, it's sad to say, and we need to be honest with ourselves. We all collectively, we have a responsibility to move away from this generational issue of stigmatizing children with learning difficulties as disabled children, or as the dumb kid, or the not very bright kid, or the naughty kid. It's our job to come away from that. Unfortunately, it is quite it is a product of a generational view that a lot of people have had, and it's a product of ignorance. And that is where Communicate comes in, because we need to educate parents and children and the community overall, so that we can come away from this sad situation that we see a lot, where kids are just being labelled as being disabled, or they're just being labelled as being, you know, unruly, just because we don't know how to deal with them. And that's not the child's fault. And I want to go over to Brother Mohammed, because you're doing a lot of very crucial work here. What are your experiences of the stigmas that are, you know, that surround in our community to do with parents and children who have speech and learning difficulties, and how does that impact the work that you do?
Sure. So I think it's important to point out, like, the generational elements attached to the work we do in terms of awareness. So what I found is, with slightly, the first generation parents, because obviously they not all of them were as educated as what their children might be. They weren't aware, or they aren't aware of what these issues might be. So obviously it's harder for them to acknowledge and appreciate what they might be. So we're finding a lot of difficulties in that age bracket. So what we're trying to do is, through obviously appearances here and having these events, and through like networking with, you know, other parents, they'll, you know, hopefully inform their networks. So that's one element. The second element is parents who are, like second or third generation, who are more aware, more discerning of these issues. They've been educated, through the English schooling system, so they're more aware of these things. So it's a lot better in those circumstances. So, and that's what we found when we ran the event last year. So we were expecting maybe 30 or 40 people, we had about 200 people, and that's because awareness is improving, but it's not improving fast enough. And what we need to do is we need to accelerate that, because otherwise the implications are what we have in the youth offending system. There's too many of our young people in that system.
It's very unfortunate, Brother Mohammed and Brother Abdul, that we only have a very limited time to speak about a vast subject that is very complex, and there's so much to say about it, and there's so many angles to look at it with. But unfortunately, we've got time constraints with the show. So what I would like to say to our audience is, you've heard from Brother Mohammed and you've heard from Brother Abdul. The work that Communicate are doing is very crucial, and the issues that we're seeing can be dealt with, and there is help available. So I would really urge all of our audience to spread the awareness. Speak to your family, speak to your friends. Tell them about the work that Communicate is doing, especially this event that is coming up from Monday to Thursday in this coming week. Please do attend.
Could we share the details?
Yeah, and we'll be sharing the details. If we can share the details on the screen, that would be very helpful. And please do attend. Please tell anybody who has got any concerns about any children who might be facing speech and language difficulties. On your screen, you can see the dates are set out there. It's from the 19th to the 22nd of December. There's going to be crucial advice that is going to be shared with you. There are going to be trained specialists who are giving up their professional time to assist the community free of charge, to educate and to equip you with really vital information about how you can help children with speech and language difficulties. So please spread the awareness. Please tell anybody who hasn't watched the show today, because as we've heard throughout the show, the key to dealing with these issues is early intervention. As you've heard from the brothers, 0 to 5 is a very crucial time, because that is where that's the time when children are forming their personalities and they're forming their abilities. And if they do need support, this is a crucial time. Brother Mohammed was telling me before in the break, 0 to 5 is not a block. So if your child is older than 5, that doesn't mean that your child wouldn't be able to come and get the support. They can help elder children as well. It's just that is the optimal time that children really need the support. So thank you again for watching our show today. Thank you very much to Brother Abdul and Brother Mohammed, both of you, for the work that you're doing in our community. Let's all support this work, and let's really deal with these stigmas, because education is key and awareness is key. So and it's our job to help our children, because it's not all about the children. It's about educating ourselves as well about how do we help our children and how do we build their futures. And as you've heard from the brothers, it's not just a matter of a stigma. There's this very close relationship between youth offending and children's speech and language difficulties. So overall, I hope that you've picked up something from our show today, and I hope that you've picked up something from our esteemed guests today. But the key message is, next week from Monday to Thursday, as you've seen, the details were just on your screen earlier in Canary Wharf. Please spread the awareness, and I'm really hopeful that through more awareness and through taking on the help that these brothers are providing in the community, that we can all hopefully be better equipped to help our children and help the future. And it's I really want to just thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you all for watching today.